Hey there, and welcome to On the House, Episode 1, the show that guides you towards what is possible with real estate investment strategies. I'm your host, Kevin Romines.
And I'm your host, Torrell Palmason. In today's episode, we'll talk with Brian Duhrkoop about how he got into wholesaling, what it's like to run his business, along with how to generate new leads. Be sure to listen all the way through to hear the tips and hard lessons he has learned along the way.
Okay, we're welcoming Brian Duhrkoop with FFF Investors to On the House podcast. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, you guys. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Hey, I just got to ask, FFF Investors, what does that stand for? I'm sure the sign above your head probably says a bit about that.
Yeah, FFF stands for Faith, Family, Freedom. And my wife and I were at a summit meeting over in Phoenix, Arizona, right before I started a mentorship program, and my wife was with me, and I can't take credit for it. She came up with the idea. It was like, well, what are we about? And family was obviously the first, and then our faith, and then it was kind of like, and then Sean Terry was up, and he's a big guy he's a veteran in the military, and he was talking about his freedoms, and I was like, gosh, that just sounds great, FFF, and so anyway, we kind of put it all together, but it was really her idea. I can't take credit for it.
Fantastic. So Sean Terry, Flip to Freedom, Sean Terry?
Yeah, Flip to Freedom. We were actually there for Cody Sperber's event with Clever Investor.
Okay.
But Sean Terry is one of the guest speakers, and I really resonate a lot with him.
Sean Terry's amazing. I've followed him for years, and even Cody Sperber, I'm familiar with him as well, but man, Sean Terry gets it done.
Yeah, the guy's a stud. He's definitely one of the best virtual wholesalers in the country, and I think he's really well grounded, and I think his company's based on some really good principles and man of integrity, and they do really well. And he's great for people that want to get started into the program with wholesaling.
So, could you give us a little bit of background about how you became a real estate wholesaler and how long you've been in the business?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely fell into it. It wasn't necessarily something that I was going to choose and say, oh, I'm going to be a wholesaler for life. I was actually a high school math teacher at Milwaukee High School over here near Portland, Oregon. I got my degree at Oregon State and my master's degree at Concordia University, and always planned on being a teacher. It was going to be a PE health teacher or a math teacher. I added math as an endorsement because at that time it was around the Great Recession in 2006, 2008. So I kind of needed to get a little more stable job. So I added math as an endorsement. And I was in public education for 12 years and did that. And kind of with the last few years of public schools, my alignment of where I felt like schools were going, we just weren't in alignment, and I didn't really like what I was doing. So at that time, I actually had a gentleman with Pinnacle Mortgage that I became friends with, helped us do a refinance on our house at that time. And we slowly became friends actually through that process. And he knew with my background in mathematics and just our friendship that he thought I'd be a good fit for their company. So I worked with him over at the Lincoln Tower over in Tigard for a year. So I took a year sabbatical from teaching. And that was an exploratory year to see if I wanted to get into real estate or go back to education. And I worked with him for about a year. We were talking a little bit ago, I got my NMLO, I got my loan originator license. I had actually failed the test twice, passed it my third time. So I was all pumped up and excited, finally get that off my shoulders. And anyway, between getting hired and this and that, and the company, I worked for basically this company that was trying to acquire multifamily properties across the Midwest. And also with the plan of originating loans. But that shifted. I ended up getting into asset management and a little bit of the property management division. And that was for about a year. And then I left there in July of 2019. So after that, I was like, you know what? I definitely liked the idea of real estate. I thought real estate was phenomenal. It was basically at that time I had two boys that were 3 years old and 1 year old. And I knew the writing on the wall that, as a school teacher and I was also a wrestling coach at the high school. Even though I was enjoying coaching and I wasn't enjoying teaching, if I was to be able to have some of the freedoms that I wanted to have with my family financially and where we were at, wasn't a good fit. I was going to have to, not necessarily settle, but it wasn't how I envisioned our family lifestyle to be. So anyway, at that same time, when I was at the crossroads, when I left that job there, it was either I go back to teaching or I get into real estate. And it was kind of I call it a God thing. Part of the reason why it's faith, family, freedom is at the same time, I ruptured a disc in my back and I couldn't work. And so I wasn't going to go back to teaching because I would have had a substitute for the first couple months while I had surgery. And I couldn't work for this guy no longer. And so it was like, man, I really want to do real estate, but how do I do real estate with, no money, with no reserves, with, not a very small bank account. And luckily my wife had a W-2 job. She's a dental hygienist. And so I spent about a month and a half kind of on my back after back surgery, just kind of looking at YouTube University and how someone gets started with, how do you get into real estate with little to no money? And I didn't necessarily want to become a real estate agent. I had this originator license that I never originated a loan. And I was like, I don't really want to go do that. That might be hard to get hired, unless I know Kevin, maybe. So then I was like, so that's when I learned about wholesaling. And Cody Sperber with out of Arizona, in Scottsdale, Arizona. He's one of the bigger gurus as far as getting newer wholesalers started. And I went to his summit in Arizona and basically got their mentorship program. And that's how I got started. So I started wholesaling live about October of 2019. So I'm just a little over 2 years in business with doing what I do today.
Fantastic. Sounds like you had a good transition. There was a few starts and stops, but that's how you find your way at times. And there's been times throughout my career that I've done the same kind of thing. So it's one of those rites of passage. It seems like you just got to go through it in that way. But so tell me about your first deal and what did that look like? How did all that happen? What were the results of that?
Yeah, so great question. So like I said, I started October 2019. I had, really what they told you in the mentorship program is as you're getting started and you're talking to sellers, there's obviously a huge learning curve and you haven't done your first deal yet. You have all these unknown answers to questions you have, and you just kind of got to go hit the ground running and get your feet wet. And so I wasn't sure, am I going to do on market deals? Am I going to look on the market through Zillow and Realtor, try to find properties that are for sale? Am I going to look at foreclosures? Am I going to maybe possibly drive for dollars? Am I going to send postcards? What am I going to do? So I started off with just looking for properties on market. And it took me a little while. I actually had, they tell you in the mentorship program, why don't you go call Craigslist leads, that are on there for sale by owners. So that way you can, it's low risk, low reward. You can have your practice conversations with sellers and they're not real estate agents. So they're not typically as educated. And so you can kind of go through some of those uncomfortable situations. So I started like a lot of people do, just on Craigslist, trying to look at for sale by owners. And then I also went on for sale by owners that were basically on Zillow or Realtor and calling those people. And so anyway, I ended up running into a real estate agent. Her name's Ginger Townsend. She worked with Mount Hood Realty. I met her, and then also Laura Steinke, who's with Stewart Title, at a function and event in early November 2019. And that's where we met. We kind of hit things off a little bit. And anyway, Ginger kind of got to find out what I was looking for. I was looking for properties that were obviously fixers, that were distressed, that were 50, 60, 70% of the mark of the ARV market value, and that were cheap fixers. And so she'd send me some drip campaigns of different properties. I actually had 2 properties fall through on me that I found along the way and learned some hard deals. One of them was in Hillsboro, where I didn't have a contract with me. I had a seller that was ready to sign, and she was ready to sign. I didn't have a contract with me. I didn't have a DocuSign account at the time. So I said, I'll be back tomorrow. And then I came back tomorrow and she had already signed a contract with somebody that morning at 6 a.m.
Wow.
Somebody came by and saw her taking the yard debris can out and signed a contract with her right there. So I lost my first deal. My mentor said, look, dude, you're never going to do that again. Always have a paper contract with you. And so that was my first hard lesson. Either have a DocuSign account to set it up right there, have your laptop with you, or have paperwork with you. So that was my first deal, went through in October. That was 3 weeks after I started. So I was pretty excited to get my first deal, and it fell through. Same thing happened in November. I had a deal. I found a buyer, and they signed my assignment contract, but they never deposited their earnest money into title. And so then their lender, who was Veristone at the time, couldn't approve the loan. So not only did we not get the deal, but I never even got earnest money up front to pay me something on the front half. So I got nothing. That one fell through. And then I was a little bit defeated. It was like 2 months gone. And then in early December, I met, Ginger found a property for me. I linked up with these three brothers. They're called Zach, Zane, and Zion Mayfield. There's three brothers, all with Z's. And we found a property. It was on Cooper Street in the Brentwood, Darlington neighborhood. And I got under contract for $150,000. It was worth about $275 at the time. Of course, the market was a lot different 2 years ago than it is now. And it was worth about $275. There was about probably $60,000, $70,000 of the work. And at that time, I didn't have a whole lot of buyers on my buyers list. These guys kind of came and they saw the value in it. Of course, they're guys that they do the work themselves. So they don't have to sub out, and they can save a lot of money on their fees. So they came in, saw the value. And so it was kind of interesting. It would have been about a $5,000 assignment fee. But of course, as wholesalers do, a lot of times they just want to get that property under contract. So they sweeten up the deal. They say, oh, I'm going to take care of your closing costs, and I'm going to close quickly. I'm going to do all these things. And so, which most of them work that way. But however, in this situation, the buyers that I worked with, they're like, well, we're not going to pay the seller's closing costs. And so anyway, Ginger went back to the seller. They wouldn't take closing costs off on their side, or they wouldn't pay for closing costs on their side. So I ended up eating that on my assignment fee. So my very first assignment fee was $3,700. It was $3,700, and it was less than my last paycheck teaching, but it was definitely the best moment I had, because it was proof of concept.
Right.
And it was a learning curve for me. And so anyway, it took me about 2.5 months to get my first deal. And so I did one deal in 2019. So that's how I got my first deal.
Sometimes it just goes that way. I had kind of a similar situation. I did some wholesaling for a little bit. And then I just got back into the mortgage industry, and I've been so busy that I can't afford time to do almost anything else. But it goes that way. You've got to grind it out. You've got to get from point A to point B, and you're going to go through some starts and stops. And, that's just part of paying your dues, if you will. So what was it like going from a full-time W-2 job employee for 12 years and then becoming a full-time investor? I'm sure there were sacrifices along the way. What did that look like?
Yeah. Definitely interesting. I grew up in a family where, real estate and investing was kind of considered risky. We're a very, conservative Christian family. And it was one of those that, taking a step out of education and teaching to do what I was doing, what I was hoping to do at the time, was really risky. I remember my parents were, just like, what are you doing? Like, this is crazy. And, making that monthly check to all of a sudden now it's like, you're fully responsible to make the income that you get. You don't have to you're not relying on anybody else to pay you. It was definitely, a shot at first, luckily my wife was super supportive. She, we had at least, we had some we took a HELOC out of our loan. And so we had a primary loan, we refinanced, we took a secondary home equity line of credit. We had some cash. We invested that cash for private money, and we got some dividends. So we were kind of living on those dividends from our private investment while I started my business. So I did have some cash to be able to help me get started. So I tell every new wholesaler that gets started, like, don't quit your full-time job to do this. It's definitely best to do it part-time and Sean Terry recommends that you have 1 year's money saved up in the bank that you make from your regular job before you start wholesaling.
Right.
So in theory, for me, that would have about $50,000 in the bank, which we didn't at the time. And so it was a risk, but it was challenging. But I tell you what, I've learned so much the last 2 years. It took me 3 months to get my first deal, but paying in for a mentorship program and all your marketing and then all the fees you got to get your LLC started and loss of time. We definitely were in the red till probably about June of 2020. So it definitely was a risk. It was a family risk, especially with a couple of young kids. You definitely have to step out, have a little bit of faith. But for sure, I tell all the people that I train and mentor, you got to put your time in this business if you want to see success. Some people do it well. I know a wholesaler named Scott Dallinger with Coast to Coast Home Buyers. He did 110 grand his first wholesale fee. And some people get that. Some people do that. Some people have that happen to them. But it's very rare. And, so you just got to stick with it and for sure put the time in. And of course, the experience that you learn along the way are what really help you get better and more polished. So
a lot of people seem to jump in feet first and then go, oh, this is hard.
Yeah. I mean, I got started about 4 months pre-COVID or 5 or 6 months pre-COVID. And there's so many investors or wholesalers I met at that time that were going to all the real estate investor meetings and all that, all the meetups. And I mean, 80-90% of them fall out, just because they can't make it, either they're too young, they don't have any financial reserves, or they burn out, or they hope to strike it rich early. And it's very rare that happens a lot.
So you had your first deal in 2019. How many deals have you done since then?
Yeah. So I did my first deal in 2 months. And then in 2020, did a lot of experimenting with, should I do on market, off market? What's going to be my platform for marketing? And then last year I did 7 deals in 2020. So that got me to 8. And then this year we've done 12. We closed one more on Friday this week, a 5-plex in Lincoln City. So this Friday will be 20 deals in 2 years. That'll be where I'm at.
It sounds like a good pace, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, 1 and then 7 and 12. I was just sitting down this last week and writing my goals for next year. We also bought a beach house in Newport that's going to become an Airbnb. So we did get one buy and hold as well for a future short-term rental. We have to wait 2.5 years to get the short-term permit. So it's just going to be a long-term rental for a while. But yeah, I mean, going from like, this is a crazy idea to get into wholesaling and get into real estate. What are you thinking? You're crazy for thinking this, to all of a sudden in 2 years, to be able to make this an actual business that I can do with employees, and also to be able to have another second house. It's pretty cool. It's exciting what doors that real estate's opened, with just, putting one foot in front of another and being humble and learning.
So you talked about Zillow and Drive for Dollars, Craigslist. How do you get your leads these days, and where do you find your buyers to market to?
Yeah, great question. And the big question with what we do in wholesaling is, do you find the deals first or do you find the buyers first? And so a lot of people are like, which way do you go? And, my advice for that is just find the deals. And if you get the great deals that are severely discounted, the buyers will come. And there's many ways to find buyers. Like I had said a little bit ago, I started pre-COVID. So I had the luxury of spending about 6 months. I went to real estate investor meetings nonstop. I went to meetups. I went to the auction courthouse steps. I went to all those places, passed my business card out, met investors, did a lot of face-to-face interaction, and then met them a second time for coffee or for lunch or breakfast, whatever, to get more information on exactly what type of property they were looking for and different specs they're looking for, different areas, different neighborhoods, and what type of real estate venue they were looking for, an avenue. So I did that the first 6 months. Obviously, COVID got a little more challenging. So there were some things I did, I would, like, for instance, I'd look for Brentwood, Darlington neighborhood, or the Woodstock neighborhood, or the Montevilla neighborhood, or different neighborhoods. And I would look for all of the fixers in those neighborhoods. And a lot of times I would go to the buyer's agent. I would call them and I would find out who their investors were, to be able, who they represented, to meet them and to talk to those people. Because if they had just done a flip in that neighborhood, obviously they're most likely an investor. So that's another way that I would go and find my buyers, and just reach them through the phone. I would very common. I would go when I would drive for dollars, and I would take pictures of houses that were obviously in rough shape and need a little bit of love. And you would do what, and this is a Sean Terry idea. You'd post them on Craigslist and say, a bunch, it's called a ghost ad, where you'd put a bunch of properties on Craigslist and say, I have lots of properties under contract coming soon. Reach out to me if you're interested in flipping a home, or if you're looking at investment properties. And you can get literally 50 to 100, buyers that way that respond to your Craigslist ads. Another one that you could do is go through your Facebook groups, and you basically get yourself signed up for every real estate Facebook group you can find. And then, put your information out there that, hey, I'm a wholesaler, I'm an investor, I'm looking to add buyers to my list. We're working hard to find, discounted properties. Please, we want to add you to our VIP list or to our list. And it's amazing how many buyers you can get just that way. So from some of those 5 or 6 ideas, I organically met probably the first about 100, 150 people. And then by using those other means, I probably got to 300, 400 buyers. And then as you start networking, which networking is huge. I mean, that's probably how I got success, was networking. You start meeting other wholesalers, other investors, and you start sharing your list with their list. And then you can just, monopolize there. You get 200 buyers and all of a sudden you have 400 and 800 and 1600. And then it goes from there. But so, how do I find my leads now? This year in 2021, all I do is I drive for dollars. So that's the number one way that I get my leads. I firmly believe right now, especially with the seller's market and the low inventory, that finding off market properties are the best way to go. And so we drive for dollars. I have about 50 bird dogs between Seattle and Roseburg and the coast and Bend, between that whole kind of rectangle, that drive for dollars for me. And they use Deal Machine. So we use Deal Machine. That's our app that we use. And they drive for dollars for me, all commission based. And they add properties. Most of them, it's their second gig. Most of them have, actually it's like their third gig. Most of them have a job and they do Grubhub or drive, and then they do that on the side. Like while they're doing Grubhub or DoorDash, they drive for dollars. So it's really a cool deal. So they're making money. So I tell them, like, it takes about $400, $500 to do this a month, minimum budget. So, go make an income, a second income to pay for your marketing. So my bird dogs, they go add leads. I export the list from Deal Machine. And then I pay for skip tracing through batchskiptracing.com. And then from there, we cold call using mojosales.com. It's Mojo's our dialer. It's a 3-way dialer where we cold call these people. We text them, we call them, we email them. We send letters to people that are out of state. We send foreclosure letters. We send vacant letters. We send abandoned homes letters. So we kind of do the whole gamut. But that's mainly, so as far as what platform I use, I solely use Deal Machine and drive for dollars. That's all we do. I do get drip campaigns still from realtors and from my title companies, and we do send letters sometimes that way. But mainly that's my whole number one platform.
Oh, you mentioned your buyers list. Do you get a lot of repeat buyers, or is it kind of single deal, or how's that work?
Yeah, great question. So, and it's so important to talk about that, because so many people they'll pride themselves and they'll gloat about the fact they got 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 buyers on their list. And the reality is, you got to have a trust and relationship built with these people. You got to know, number one, that they mean business. Number two, you got to know that they have financial backing, whether it's their own or whether they have, someone like Kevin or you, Torrell, that can help them get the assistance they need to close on a house in a timely fashion. You really got to vet your buyers. And so for me, I have roughly 2,000 buyers on my list, but I've only really do business with about 50 of them on a regular basis. I like the Mayfield brothers. I was telling you that I met the very first time. We've closed 7 deals together, me and those 3 guys. And then I've with a few other buyers that we've done 2, 3 together. And so I really like working with the same people that I've had. So what happens now, in fact, it was crazy. We just had 4 properties under contract like 2.5 weeks ago, and which was crazy because October, November was really rough for me. I had no deals. And then all of a sudden we got 4 in the matter of 2 weeks. And all 4 of those deals, I didn't even really market those that much. I really went right to the people who I'd done deals with before and just give them to them because they've proven themselves honest. They've been credible. They close on time. We have everything worked out as far as earnest money. And sometimes I pay earnest money, sometimes they do, but we have everything worked out. The relationship's built. So to answer the question, yeah, I mean, most of the deals I do are with repeat buyers, people that I've worked with before. And just because for me, I would much rather take guaranteed money over the question mark of making more. So I would rather work with people that I trust. And so mostly I work with repeat buyers.
So you mentioned you got your people doing your drive for dollars, which I'm assuming are kind of like a third-party deal. How many people do you actually have working for FFF? Yeah,
well, I have about 65 that I've worked with this year. And And all of them were in as early phases as like, hey, what's wholesaling, to I really want to do this full time. So all of it's kind of been the whole gamut of the people that I've worked with. And how this started was, like I said, I was a school teacher for 12 years. So I wanted to get back into education and teaching. And I'm definitely not polished by any means. I'm still kind of in the early amateur phases. But I was like, how do I get back into teaching and helping these people understand that, like, hey, this is a real thing. Like, you can watch a YouTube video all you want and spend 6 months on YouTube watching people, but the reality is you're not going to get a deal if you don't hit the pavement and get started. And so I've worked this whole year on helping people get their first deal. So out of my 12 deals this year, 8 of them have been with other wholesalers that I've split some commissions with who've worked for me. And so around 65-ish got started, but now I've got 37 that at least still put leads in weekly. So, and really they do it on their own time. They don't get paid. So there's really not enough motivation unless they get a deal. But it's helping put enough leads into the pipeline to where I'm able to kind of work in here by myself from the office and then go to those appointments. So yeah, what we do is they drive for dollars. They put the leads in, we cold call together. And if whatever we don't get, either my assistant in the office calls or I got 2 VAs, they call, and we try to get through the lists. So virtual assistants, VAs, are very helpful to get through the list. They don't have as much of a turnover and success rate as we would like, but they're with a guy like me that has a cheaper marketing budget. It's a good way to enter into the market, to get your leads vetted through at least the first or second time.
Nice.
Yeah, so we do that. So we drive for dollars, we cold call. Then the goal is to get an appointment, and then we go on an appointment together. So I go over, which is going to get to a few questions we might get to a little later, but we go over like rehab costs and like, how much does it cost for a new roof? How much does it cost for new gutters? How much does it cost for siding? What does it cost to rehab this whole kitchen? What does it cost for a bathroom? What does it cost to lay the floor down in this house? And so on. And so we talk about, I mean, obviously we don't have it guaranteed tight, but we have a good estimate based upon what that's going to look like. You know, usually we're pretty close within 10 or 15,000 on a big budget, you know, what that looks like by my mentorship training and also by working with investors. And it definitely changes up and down the gamut, but that's what we do. We try to get the appointments, then we get under contract. I show them how to find a buyer. I show them how to close the deal. And then we split commission 70-30 along the way. And they love it. They actually get paid and for their first deal, which a lot of mentorships don't. I'm obviously not a Cody Sperber, a Sean Terry, a Max Maxwell. I'm not none of those guys, but I just want to help them get that. Oh yeah, this is reality. This is proof of concept. This can happen. It is a viable business. And to be able to get them, you know, some cheap mentorship training along the way without having to pay anything out of pocket.
Got to get them started in the game.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you mentioned you have a pretty minimal marketing budget. So how much does it take to actually run your business monthly?
Yeah. So right now it's about $1,200. That's how much I spend a month. I have an assistant in the office that I pay. She works 16 hours a week. So she works 64 hours a month. I have 2 VAs that I pay $4 an hour. They both call 20 hours a week. And then I pay for obviously stamps and postage. And then I pay with my subscriptions to my monthly subscription to Deal Machine, my monthly subscription to DocuSign, monthly subscriptions to, you know, a lot of different sources. And then, it's, you know, it's about $1,200 a month. But I do tell people that get started, I give them all the free ways of getting started. You know, one of the best ways of getting started, if you don't have any money, is go to your title company, tell them you are a wholesaler or you're an investor and that you want to be able to get foreclosure leads. And a lot of times they'll send you stuff. Or make friendships with your agents and tell them you're going to use them on your purchases and then your flips, and they're going to get the front listing and the back listing, and let them send you sometimes drip campaigns, and maybe they'll send you an occasional CMA report for you to be able to help get some comps. But really that stuff from the title company is free. One thing that I think is amazing, and I'd love to share it, is fastpeoplesearch.com. It's one word, fastpeoplesearch.com. And you put that in the internet, and I mean, it's about 80% accuracy to be able to find anyone and their phone numbers and their emails and relatives and a whole bunch of information. It's free. So when they drive for dollars, obviously we have an app that gives us that information. But if someone were to get started and they had no money or very little budget, they could just drive for dollars. Obviously it's gas they got to put in their tank, but they can write down manually the address of these houses. They can go into Fast People Search. They can find out who the owner is, and they can find their phone number and they can call them right away. they can. And another thing I do is I have these letters right here. It says FFF Investors. I pre-do about 50 handwritten letters and typed letters that I leave on people's doorsteps when I drive for dollars. So if I see a abandoned house or a vacant house, I'll leave a letter. If I see, really distressed house, but no one's there, I'll leave a letter. And they're already done. So they're right there. I don't have to pay for postage. All I had to pay for was this envelope. And so, which, obviously is a cost, but that's cheap,
Minimal compared to all the postage and everything else.
Yeah. Calling someone's free. Knocking on their door and talking to them is free. I know a lot of people are scared to do that, but just like Sean Terry knocked on over 2,000 doors before he got his first deal. Now he does over $1 million in assignment fees a month. So it's sometimes you just got to grind and make it happen,
Well, we're going into 2022. So what kind of goals do you have for your business and personal?
Yeah. So I haven't done any flips yet. So this year, my goal is to do 2 flips. My goal is to try to do around 20 wholesale deals just this year alone. So I've kind of been from 1 to 7 to 13. So I want to hit that 20 benchmark. I like to do 20 wholesale deals this year and 2 flips. And I'd like to get 1 buy and hold rental. One of the things that I really enjoyed doing at my previous job under asset management was all I did all day long was calculate, everything from cap rate to cash on cash and all the returns. And I would call utility companies, I would call the owners manually, and I'd figure out, what the profits look like. And so I'd love to be eventually get a multifamily this year, maybe a 2, 3, 4 door, probably just a multifamily residential, nothing real big. A multifamily property somewhere, maybe Midwest. I like Tennessee, I like Ohio. I wouldn't mind Florida or Texas or even Idaho or Colorado. I like those markets. But that's my goal: 2 flips, 20 wholesale deals, and 1 buy and hold multifamily.
Fantastic.
Hefty goal there.
Yeah, you're going to be a busy guy.
We'll see.
So we're coming into the end of the year, and of course, what's one of the things that comes up for end of the year is your taxes. Do you have a particular way that you plan out your taxes, or do you work with a particular CPA or tax strategist? How does that look?
Yeah, I'm probably not, the person who's done the most research on the best people to work with. There's a gal who did our personal returns and also does our company and business returns over in Gladstone, Clackamas Income Tax Bookkeeping, and she does a great job. But since I got started there, basically always take, when you get your profits, try to pull 30% of your net aside. And so that's just what I do. After, I make all my payments for the month and take care of everything. I try to peel off after, my 10% to the church, the rest of it, about 20 to 30%. I don't do always 30%, sometimes in leaner months, but 20 to 30% I put off into the savings. And what actually was interesting was this last year, we went from we changed to an S Corp, our business model to an S Corp, and we saved a whole bunch of money on our taxes. And so we actually got a refund, which was surprising. So, but yeah, the big thing is peeling off 20 to 30% and putting it in savings. The other is making sure you keep all your receipts and keep everything. And of course, I do drive for dollars, so everything's tax deductible when I'm driving. My gas, my mileage, my postage, my stamps. So almost everything I do, it's incredible if you really do your homework and try to figure out, the right ways of making sure you have your deductions for your business figured out. But yeah, that's basically what I do, and let her take care of the rest. And she gives me the slap on the hand when I make mistakes, but do my best.
So I assume with some of your repeat buyers, you've kind of stayed connected, excuse me, as you went through, or as they've went through the flip. Have they made the kind of profit that they were looking for? And what does that end of things look like? Yeah.
So I think so obviously not everything's the same, we've had some people make over 6 figures on flips. We've had some people make 30, 40. I can thankfully say no one's lost money. So that's good on the ones that I've assigned. We had one really rough one happen this year, and it was, probably won't go into it, but anyway, they're still working on it. But it's very important. So I feel like as a wholesaler, when I run my numbers and I try to put an offer out to a seller, that I really want to make sure there's lots of meat on the bone for an investor. So, obviously 2019 and then parts of 2020, before we kind of got this huge boom sellers market, you could get properties for 50, 60 cents on the dollar, and there was lots of meat on the bone for investors. This year, the game changed a ton. We were able to sell stuff 70, 80 cents on the dollar in some cases, just because, even if it looked lean, market was still going up. So some people who thought they might just barely break even or maybe make 10,000 still made 40, 50, 60,000 on their flips, because everybody was offering, their highest and best above asking.
Right.
But on average, most flippers will make between 40 to 60,000 after they're paying their realtor commissions, their holding costs, their closing costs, and their staging costs and everything, their insurance costs. It's around 40 to 60. Sometimes they'll hit a home run out of the park and do really well, but I think the lowest was like 28,000. I think that a flipper made. But yeah, it's around average 40 to 60. And that's another reason why I want to do a couple of flips this year to get the experience and to be able to have that opportunity to go through those myself.
Yep. Got to build that nest egg, and that nest egg allows you to go to the next deal, the next deal, the next deal, whatever those deals might look like. How do you estimate your rehabs and your ARVs?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I get a property under contract, what I will typically do is, if I have a real estate agent in that area that I have a really good relationship with, I'll have them run a comparative market analysis, a CMA report, which gives me an up-to-date report on all of the properties in that area within a mile or so, half mile, depending on the specs of the house. Kind of tells me what the previous sold properties were within the last 3 months. Now, it used to be you could find properties 6 months to a year, and it was good comp. But with this market this year going up, we had to find properties within, even in some case, 30 days, 60 days to be able to have a good idea of what the property was worth. And then, of course, we'd get pending properties and stuff like that. So what we would do is we would get those properties and we would look and see if those were properties that were flipped properties. So if they were properties that were purchased at a discount and were turned around and flipped for a profit, and they were fully updated. So everything to the nines, like everything was perfect in the house, brand new, everything, fully updated kitchens and bathrooms and floors and everything. We would try to use those if it allowed, if we got those, we actually had those, we would use those as our comps. So we could know that, if we were to buy this property today and flip it in the next 90 days, what is our potential ARV, or after repair value? So that's, in an ideal world, what we would try to get is the flipped properties in that area. But what we would do is we would take, if I don't have that ability from an agent, I would just go on Zillow or Realtor. I'd look for the most recent sold listings in the last 90 days. And I would take those 3 properties that seem like the best comparative properties to the property we're looking at. And I would add those up, divide by 3, find a mean, find an average. And then that's what I would use for my ARV. So this year, we would find ARV for a property. And then back in March, April, we could multiply it times 0.85 or 0.80 to be able to factor in an investor discount. And because the markets were going up, we could do ARV of 0.85 or 0.80. But 2020, it was standard like it used to be for wholesale. You would take the ARV and multiply it times 0.70. Right. And then you would subtract your rehab there. So how do we estimate our rehab cost? We take the ARV, and then in today, right now, it's winter, but it's still a seller's market. We multiply it times 0.80. And it depends whether it's a primary market or a secondary market. So like if it's Portland, I would multiply it times 0.80. If it's like you guys are up in Washington, if it was like for me, like Centralia or Chehalis, like I'm actually trying to get a property under contract this week, I multiply times 0.70. So right. ARV times 0.70, and then subtract my rehab costs. Then I would factor in a 5,000 or 10,000 assignment fee, depending on, how much meat's on the bone there. And then from there, I would give my maximum allowable offer, my MAO, my offer to my seller. But that's typically what I would do. And it just kind of depends on the market and where it's at. And if it has strong comps there, if it doesn't have strong comps there, if it's rural, if it's urban, there's so many factors to determine. And especially you guys know that area up there, but like Centralia, I have some relatives that live out in Centralia. It's amazing. Like on one street, I have Victorian houses, I have mobile homes, I have a single family home built in 1980. I have a house built in 1900, historic home. Like it's crazy just the differences in the houses on one or two streets. And so it gets more challenging, obviously, in those areas. And if I don't feel good myself on the numbers, then I'll go check a couple people, some credible sources, usually some agents or, some lenders in the area or different investors that regularly flip homes there. Yeah.
Well, and you kind of hit on my next question a bit in your previous answers, but just so that we, everybody that might be watching the podcast here is got a better feel for it. Can you elaborate as to your formula as to how do you go through and what are the numbers? What are the percentages? You kind of did that already, but if you could just kind of walk through that again real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I say like the ARV, which stands for after repair value, we multiply that number times a decimal. And in this case, the formula that I was talking about for Chehalis Centralia is 0.70, which is 70% of the ARV. So why I'm doing that, what I'm factoring in is I'm factoring in many things. I'm factoring in my holding costs of the property. I'm factoring in my taxes paid on a loan for acquiring that property, all the taxes associated, insurance, profit, realtor costs on the back end, staging costs, anything that factors into that time frame between purchase and actually resell. So that 0.70 involves a lot of different categories. Obviously, Kevin can speak to it really well, but when somebody will take out a hard money loan, obviously they've got some points up front they have to pay. They have a percentage interest they got to pay on their loan. And so that's where I get the 0.70 is all of those things being taken into account, try to multiply it times 0.70 to get that investor discount. So it's already factored in. And that's really difficult because, for instance, some people will pay all cash and they won't use a lender. Some people might use private money and then their rates are different. And so this is a big thing with wholesaling is like, some people will multiply times 0.85 or 0.80 or 0.90. They won't factor that stuff in. And that's a big deal because if somebody's coming in, either they're going to say the wholesaler has no clue what they're talking about, or two, they don't know how to run their numbers on rehab, or three, they're just factoring in only somebody who's going to pay all cash. And so we have to assume that people are not going to pay all cash, that they're going to be borrowing to be able to finance their purchase. And so we want to make sure that we factor that in. So that's why we do 0.70. It's not a all, like I said, it's not an always fits all model. Depends on the market, depends on the city. Like I was saying, Portland is 0.80 for me today. Salem, we just closed the properties last week. It was 0.80 is what I used for that formula for that one. And it was more of a cosmetic fixer. But anyway, so back to your question. So we take the after repair value, we multiply it times 0.70 to factor all that stuff in. And then from there, you'll get a number. So for example, let's say it's a $400,000 house. We multiply it times 0.70. That gets us down to 280,000. Is that correct math, Kevin?
Yep, sounds about right.
And then let's say that house that I just looked at, let's say we looked at the roof. It's a 2,000 square foot home. We multiply it times 5 to factor in what an average roof cost would be with gutters. So we subtract 10,000 for roof. If it's 2,000 square foot home, we'd multiply it times 4 to figure out the flooring. That'd be 8,000 for flooring. Siding, we usually multiply times 2.5. That's like 25 grand. So we have basic formulas we use for every parts of the house. That includes everything: dumpsters, dumpster costs, landscaping, kitchen remodels, bathroom remodels. So we subtract all of that rehab budget from that number. And in this case, it was 280,000.
Right.
So for example, let's say we found $50,000 in rehab. So we would take 280,000, we would subtract 50,000. And if I had my screen, I'd show you it all, whatever. I used to be a math teacher, but so 280,000 minus 50,000 gives us to 230,000. And then let's say I want to get 10,000 for an assignment fee. I would then subtract $10,000 to get down to 220,000. So, and if I feel like this seller is someone I can negotiate with, and sometimes I might offer lower, like 200 or 205 or 210 to have that wiggle room in case they try to negotiate with me up. But that's what I would typically do. The ARV times 0.70 minus the rehab repair minus my assignment fee. That gives me my maximum allowable offer that I would give to a seller.
That
Hope
is,
that makes sense.
that's perfectly said, and absolutely the correct method.
Sorry, probably too
for
long-winded.
doing that. So, but most people, especially when they're new, it's kind of hard for them to understand the concept of that particular formula. That's just one of the many things that they need to know as they're learning their craft, if you will. So
Kevin has definitely ran me through that one a couple times now.
Yeah. And then an ARV is so different compared to just, what someone would sell on, their house for. Just different. It just depends on if it's fixed up or if it's not fixed up. So, yeah. Good question.
If you have someone brand new to the business and you could give them some advice, what would you give them?
Yeah. So at the beginning, we talked about if somebody wants to wholesale, I definitely recommend it. It is a great way to get into the real estate business. Most people who become a lender or they become a real estate agent, or, maybe they work with a title company, become a title officer. A lot of them start with, the grassroots, which is wholesaling, and you really kind of learn how to, kind of enter into this space. A lot of people do that. For me, I think it was a great learning experience. I learned a lot of mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes and learned along the way, but I would recommend it. I think it's fantastic. It definitely can help change your life. But at the same time, you definitely need to be ready to have some tough skin. You're going to hear some tough things. You're going to have some people say some things to you that you may not feel real comfortable with. You're going to have, and you want to have some reserves. So if you get started, don't quit your job. I mean, my advice, don't quit your job. I fell into it and I kind of had to make it work or not. But I would recommend having 1 year of your income saved in the bank if you want to do it full time. But I think it's a great way to get started part time. If you have a full time job and you're making income, try to peel off a couple $100 a month and use that for marketing and try to just go at it slow. Maybe find a mentor that can help you get going and help you, have not as make less mistakes in the early phases and help and give of their time to you. But also if somebody says they're going to give you some free mentoring, take them up on it because it's expensive. It can be really expensive. People do this full time. I paid about $8,000 for Cody Sperber's program. I'm looking at getting to Pace Morby's next, which is on creative financing. And those are anywhere between 6 to 10,000. If you want to, there's a lot of great mentorship programs up there, but if someone's want to give you of their time and they want to do it for free, seriously, don't take them up on it. It doesn't matter whether they're polished or not. Like anything you can learn is I learn daily something new. So number one, be humble and do not act like you know it all, because every day I learn something new from somebody. And keep growing and be willing to adapt and have some money set aside and just be willing to, put your bootstraps on and go to work and work your tail off. It is hard work. It is definitely hard work. But it is very rewarding for sure.
Oh yeah. So could you summarize your worth to the buyer and how that looks? Because ultimately, if you're bringing good value to that buyer, you're going to sell.
Yeah, good question. I have so many people that, they're a lot of times they have their family, they have their full-time job, they're working, or maybe they're already a flipper and they're working on homes. A lot of times they don't have time to just, get nitty gritty and look for these off-market stuff. It is difficult to find off-market properties. We have, roughly 15,000 leads that we've gotten from Driving for Dollars. And you really have to, it takes about 9 contacts on average to get these people to finally sign a contract with you. And so it takes a lot of work. And so it's a lot of follow-up. It's a lot of time. It's somebody who, it's got to be somebody who has the time to do that. And so most flippers, they don't have the time to just do this full time to find these severely discounted properties. They don't have time to vet all this stuff and to be able to find those deals. Yes, many of them do sometimes on their own, but it's difficult. And so the value we bring to them is that they don't have to worry about doing anything other than what they're already doing. They can just work on the homes they're already working on. They can invest how they're already investing. And then we bring deals to them discounted. And all they have to do is, double check our work and see if it is in fact a good deal or not. And We don't like to market or get properties under contract unless they're already a good deal. So all they really have to do is just kind of, if I was an investor and I had plenty of cash or I had a full-time job and I wanted to get into the market, but I didn't want to wholesale, I would try like crazy to meet as many wholesalers, get on many buyers lists as possible. Because you might get a lot of deals come your way that aren't a good fit, but when that one comes, you're going to be so thankful that you didn't have to do all the hours and hours and hours of work to find that deal and to get under contract. And for a very minimal cost, an assignment fee to be able to get that deal with hopefully a lot of meat on the bone. Wholesalers can be a great value to you. Definitely as you're trying to, increase your portfolio and your net worth. For sure.
Honestly, and that's my experience as well. The ones that have created the systems, gotten some mentorship and gotten some ideas as to the pathways to go, and that they're the ones that also grind it out. They make it, and they do make a good living in the business and that kind of thing. But there are so many that I see that they just either don't understand what some of the processes are, or they just get disheartened when a deal falls apart, and or they're just flat missing the boat on how they're calculating ARV or the rehab. Those are the two most common things that I see. And so, but when somebody gets it right and they grind it out and they make it happen, it's a very, very good living. And at that point, they don't want to do anything else. So, so if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, what are the ways that they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, I think, I can give you a few different ways. I am on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, but I'll give you my direct phone number. I can give you that first if somebody wants to text me or call me. I'm okay with that. If you guys are okay with that. Yeah,
absolutely. Go ahead and let everybody know the different ways. And what we're going to do is we'll put your contact information in the podcast, in the links down below.
Okay. Probably the 4 ways to get a hold of me. My cell phone number is 971-235-0350. 971-235-0350. That's my direct cell phone. They're welcome to call me or text me there and give me their name and their email so I can add them to my buyers list, and what area they are looking to invest in. Also, my email, they can get a hold of me through email if they want to give me more detailed information. And it's Brian with an I at FFFinvestors.org. Brian at FFFinvestors.org. They can go on Facebook and they can find me at Brian Duhrkoop. I have a couple of them. One's Brian Duhrkoop, one's Brian Paul Duhrkoop. Don't go to the middle name. Brian Duhrkoop is the one that I use. And they can go to Instagram, Duhrkoop Brian, and go there as well and friend me. And then they can also see my properties there. But the main place that I market my properties is through email. So if they could text me their email address or call me, give me their email address or whatever, that's the best way. So I can put them on my list.
Absolutely. Well, you've been a wealth of information, great information. And so I would highly encourage anybody that's been listening, if you are looking for deals, get a hold of Brian and he will get you on his list. And I'm sure there's going to be a property at some point on some level that you're going to want to jump in and go ahead and take down. So thank you so much for joining our podcast. And it's been great. You're just a mountain of great information. So that's all the time we have for today. We want to thank you for joining us to hear from Brian Duhrkoop regarding wholesaling.
Make sure to stay connected on all of our platforms, including South Sound Real Estate Networking on Facebook, On the House on YouTube, and all the places you get your podcasts.
Look for our next episode about lending options for fix and flips and buy and hold.